Hello, this is Susie Butcher from Missions Accepted, and this is the Missions Accepted Mission Cast, where I get to speak to lots of amazing women who've made the decision to make a change in their life from whatever they were doing before, might have been their careers for 20 years, and decided to do something that's a bit more aligned with their own values, a bit more mission-led, something that has a purpose that speaks to them, big or small. So today I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Amber and Karen from the FOLDE bookshop in Dorset. Welcome, both of you.
Hello. Hi.
Right. So we're just going to have a chat today really about what's brought you to this point, how you've been through the process and decided that this was the thing to do. So, Amber, perhaps if you could start and just tell me a little bit about what kind of career you had beforehand, before you decided to go down this path.
Well, I'd been in the corporate world for nigh on 25 years, heading up sustainability in a global tech firm in the aviation sector. And it was an amazing time, but, it was a long time as well. And certainly I was ready for a change by the time we got to the decision to open a bookshop.
Lovely. And what about you, Karen?
I had a career that started off in publishing. So books have always been a feature, or had been a feature. And then it sort of segued into marketing, where I spent most of my career. And more recently, before we opened FOLDE, I was the marketing director for an independent school about 12 miles away from Shaftesbury, where I live. So
I think, Amber, you had a lot of travel then, and Karen, at that point, not so much. Is that right?
No, but long. I mean, it was a 24/7 boarding environment, and although I wasn't sort of involved in looking after children 24/7, because it was a marketing role. The very nature of it is that it was sort of long hours, and I would find that I was spending, albeit not geographically far from home, I was spending a very long time in the office. And Amber and I both sort of had a sense that we were missing something, because we love the town we live in. Shaftesbury's beautiful. It's in North Dorset, in rolling hills. It's one of the highest towns in England. And it's a place that we both had chosen to move to some years ago. We are actually neighbours. We're sort of our gardens back onto each other, which is how we met, the garden fence. And I sort of realised as time was rolling on that I wasn't really spending much time here, and this is where I'd wanted to be. But also I had a sense, and it must be something to do with midlife, and you realise that you're not here forever, that I'd done everything sort of in a textbook way. I'd kind of worked hard at school, got good exam results, gone to university, got my foot on this, the publishing ladder, then subsequently marketing, and you work hard and you get promoted, and work hard and get promoted. And I got to sort of midpoint and thought, I'm not sure this is cutting it for me anymore. I don't feel, I need a different kind of fulfillment. And that's what sort of had me casting around for something else, and then sort of meeting Amber's eyes and recognizing in her that she was at a similar point in her career, sort of looking to do something for ourselves, I think.
And close at home, I mean, my job took me travelling, and it was an amazing privilege to travel all over the world. But, I used to eagerly follow sort of Karen's daily posts of the view over my rooftop to have that connection back to home. And that link to being in Dorset is very strong for both of us. So that was very much at the heart of knowing when we wanted to do something different, we wanted to do it in our town.
Yeah. So was the bookshop sort of an obvious idea, or did it take some work to kind of decide that's where you wanted to end up?
Well, I think, it was funny because, our bookshop is it's nature. It's a bookshop, and we sometimes refer to it as a bit of a gallery too, because we do sell local art, but its central theme is nature and landscape. And there was a kind of an evolution of thinking that led us to this. So a lot of people think that we did it inspired by what happened in the lockdown, when everyone apparently reconnected with nature, or found that they sort of rediscovered a closer connection with nature. But actually we had the idea before that, because I think for both of us, being outdoors and being in nature had been fundamental in terms of maintaining our well-being when we were working in those very, very busy environments. So I needed, when I wasn't at work, I really needed to spend time outdoors. I love to walk. I walk the coast path. I love to swim. And it was a real sort of a gut feeling that this was of fundamental importance to me. And we'd sort of And Amber, similar. I think when you spent all that time away and abroad, and all you were hankering after was the hedgerows and lanes of Dorset, really.
That's it. Kind of, it very much kept us grounded, and we figured if we felt like this, we couldn't be the only two people in the world who felt like this.
And I think there was also a sense I really wanted to share it. I really love this place where we live, this county, and I wanted to share it. And we sort of realised that we kind of looked at all the books that we were reading and realised that a good number of them were nature writing. It still continues to be a rapidly growing genre. And then the artwork that we had on our walls sort of had a common thread. It was tended to be landscape, nature-based things that kind of reminded of us all of the things we love to do outdoors, and sort of aesthetically it kind of worked together. And then we kind of went, well, what about if we did this? And so the idea sort of evolved, but it evolved from the theme rather than the notion that we should open a bookshop. So I always, because somebody once said to us, well, if the Yellow Pages were still going, which section would you be in? And although we are recognised as booksellers and we are members of the Booksellers Association, it didn't come from this sort of we must open a bookshop. It was more about that desire to share our love. When we talk about mission, and really wanting to share the benefits of that nature connection and celebrate this wonderful county that we're fortunate to live in.
And this is what makes it so special, I think, is when it does come from a mission, not just, I think I might be able to make some money out of selling books. It's a very different process, isn't it? And the alignment you feel to get up every day and do all the things and learn all the things and everything you need to do, so much easier when you know it's driven by something that is important to you.
Yes, definitely.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think we've kind of always rooted the values and the mission of the shop around land, sea and self. So it's love for the environment, whether it's waterways, whether it's walking cliff tops, hills, vales, holloways, of which there are plenty in Dorset, but that link to mental health and well-being. But we've always said it's not just about buying the things, it's about being out in nature and taking that positive impact you can, and understanding about your environment or understanding about change and what you need to do. And we have some very interesting and very animated discussions in the shop about everything from sewage in the water to the right to roam. It's really broad ranging, and people come to us because they want to know, what should I read next, what do I need to do, what do I need to know about where I am. And it's quite a privilege to be able to do that, I think.
Yeah. Now, people, we're not going to pretend with any venture like this that you just sort of wake up and everything's sorted for you. I mean, what kind of challenges did you feel you really had to overcome to get to this point?
Well, we didn't have a clue. we had this idea, and then we thought, well, how do you do that? We didn't know. We had no experience in retail at all. Neither of us. We had many skills to bring to this venture, but we didn't know how to run a bookshop, even how to run a shop of any kind.
We didn't know where to get any books from. We knew nothing about commercial leases. We didn't even know quite. We were going to open a shop of some sort, maybe 3 or 4 years down the line, once we had some experience. And that got kind of knocked off entirely because, sort of 3 or 4 months after opening, we looked around a shop and had a set of keys about 3 weeks later.
Because it's worth saying that we set up online first. So we thought we would test the concept because we thought it was a good idea. But we thought in that it must have been in the summer of 2020, we sort of thought, well, we'll launch it as an online journal and we'll post some articles about the things that interest us and see what people say. And we started our Instagram account and steadily built up a nice following. And then we started up a small e-commerce offering, again, to see whether people got the concept of what we were trying to do and whether they would buy related items. And it was all run from Amber's spare bedroom.
Because in COVID,
were you still working at this point, or had you already given up your jobs at that point?
I'd given up my job. I left in the May of 2020. I mean, talk about fear of the unknown, giving up my job in February with a 3-month notice period going into a global pandemic. But I needed the time and I needed the respite. So, that wasn't quite so bad as it sounds. It was, but again, thinking about challenges, it was a shock to the system from being a relatively big fish to kind of being able to have time to my thoughts. It was a culture change for sure.
Yeah, and I was still working. It's worth saying that I am not one of life's risk takers. I never have been. Anything but, as I said, I've done everything by the book. You work hard, you get the good job and with a good salary and a pension. And I had never, ever in my entire professional life taken any kind of leap of faith at all. And I was very nervous about doing it. I mean, it's a big undertaking to let go of that regular salary and to still not really know whether this would pay the bills or not. And so I mean, it's fortunate in a way because Amber sort of was able to progress a lot of things while I was still working. I mean, we were kind of beavering away every hour. I mean, I was, writing social posts at 6 a.m. before I went off to my proper job. And we were doing everything around the edges. You find the time somehow, you find that magic time. So for me, it was sort of a side hustle, but Amber was able to sort of move things forward. So I'd come home from work and she'd say, look, I've booked someone to put the flooring in, or
we've signed the waste hierarchy paperwork and, exciting stuff. But
but I think we saw it. I heard, and I cannot think, it might have been someone like Jo Fairley who founded Green and Blacks. I heard her say once that if you have a business idea and you think it's good, you just need to see it as a series of problems that need to be solved. And that's kind of how we took it, is here's a task list. Here are the things that we think we need to do. Number one, and you just work through them and then you sort of find your way. And I think it's also worth saying that booksellers are generally, we found to be a very warm and generous community. So people will tell you, other booksellers will tell you, there's a lot of information and advice out there from the Booksellers Association, but even from our wholesaler gardeners, they've been incredibly generous in helping us to get started in terms of what they've told us. But I think, and we now try and pay it back for other people, but other booksellers will help you and give you advice. So if you ask for it, their help is out there.
I think that's really important, is this idea that you don't have to do everything on your own. In fact, I don't know how anyone does it on their own, really. There's too much to learn.
So much. We're still learning.
Yeah, well, I can imagine. I mean, it goes on, and of course the industry changes and all sorts of things happen, and legislation changes and all those kinds of things. So having the support of some sort of network, some sort of tribe around you, and of course you've got each other, which is also fabulous. I'm sure there's been ups and downs with that, as there are with any kind of relationships.
No, actually, do you know what? I think I've said before, we're each other's cheerleader. Actually, I think it's wonderful to have somebody to work with. We each know our own strengths and we play to those. And it isn't, it would be hard to do this on your own, I think. In this, there's a lot to do. And I feel like we've got sort of double the skills and experience to bring to the party. So we can usually work stuff out between us, can't we?
Absolutely. And I think something that helped really early on was we went through sort of in our shareholder agreement, we thought about all the great things that could happen and all the worst things that could happen, and how we might deal with different situations, from whether or not somebody wanted to sell the business or hiring people, or even vetoing different supply options, or what we were willing to compromise and what we weren't. So we nailed a lot of that down, admittedly perhaps with a glass of wine or a cup of tea, but we did write it down as well. And that was really helpful. And I think also our other halves have been very good as sounding boards, to say, look, we think this, what do you think? And they have thoughts, they have ideas, but that's been helpful too.
Yeah, because I think I was going to say, it's kind of, it doesn't just affect us. It has affected both our partners. They've been involved in decision making and given us their full support to do this. But I think the other thing we did that was important, we spent those odd days of lockdown, when you remember when there was a time when you were finally allowed to exercise with somebody from outside your own household. So Amber and I used to go for long walks around Shaftesbury, and we really sort of formalized, or in our heads, we formalized what we felt our values to be, what the values of the business would be, what our purpose was, but a real sense that we just agreed. For example, how we would approach social media. We always do it absolutely 100% authentically as ourselves. What you see is what you get with us, and a sort of shared agreement. There's nowhere, neither of us can curate ourselves. We might be able to curate a shop, but we just can't do that thing to pretend that we're something we're not. We're two middle-aged women who've done a major career shift, and we are open and honest about that. And I think having that time to really nail down between us what mattered, and as Amber said, that was formally within our partnership agreement, but also in terms of how we would approach our communications, or everything really, sort of even in terms of aesthetics, the amount of time we spent on Pinterest mood boards for shops, but actually, and then that we knew we know, and instinctively where something is right for us or not, because it's almost like we have this kind of, I don't know, it's a manifesto almost. And I think just occasionally, you said, oh, sometimes do we have our ups and downs? I suppose sometimes one of us might be keen to stock something that the other is less sure about. We've never had a major disagreement on that yet, because we have very similar taste. But I think we'll say, okay, well, let's try it and we'll see. There's always scope to give the other one a bit more latitude to perhaps try something. But it's I think just that sense of really knowing what our purpose was from the outset has made it more harmonious than it might otherwise have been.
And I think that comes with age as well. We've both been around the block. We've worked with our fair share of interesting and brilliant and challenging people. So we're done with all the nonsense. It's what's the point of that? And that's one of the reasons that I think people make a decision to change their life midlife, because there's a certain amount of things that they just can't be bothered with dealing with anymore. And it's really refreshing. And we laugh a lot, ridiculous amounts. Honestly, the first 6 months our jaws were aching from just remembering to laugh again in a working environment, and it's a joy.
Yeah, and it's so lovely to hear that, and to hear that is possible for I mean, we're seeing women, particularly senior women, choosing to do this at all over the place at the moment. I mean, Nicola Sturgeon, Jacinda Ardern, a lot of that happening, but also it seems that women want to work on their own terms a lot more, certainly at a certain age. And that's sad for the corporate world, but they're going to have to adjust, or we're just going to have a lot of other businesses that are run by people doing things their own way. So I guess, what does it mean to you, thinking of your lives before and thinking of taking that risk and setting this up? What has it meant for you?
I mean, from my perspective, I'd been in one organisation for a long, long time. I had a huge crisis of confidence. It was like, what if I'm making the worst possible mistake? And then what if I'm not making the worst possible mistake? What am I missing out on? And it took me, in my own mind, probably 18 months to get to the point where I felt, as a woman of my age, that I'd done everything I possibly could to fix where I was, and I couldn't. And when I made that decision, it was terrifying. But the second I'd done it, I felt a sense of relief. So now, kind of coming into this and doing something with somebody who shares the enthusiasm and the passion and the values of the project, it's enlightening and inspiring, and it's never ever boring. It's a joy to get up and come to work the way we do, and to know that every day is different, and underneath our own guise and steam and success, it's more than I could ever have imagined.
And Karen, what are your thoughts?
Well, all that. A bit like Amber, I felt, and I don't know whether it's to do with life stage or what, but I had lost myself a bit, actually, the last few years at work in what I referred to as my proper job, because this really doesn't feel like work. And I mean that in a really good way. I had lost a sense of self and questioning what I was doing, but also doubting myself, doubting my abilities. And there are all sorts of reasons for that, I think. And actually, I have never been more sure of anything than what we're doing now. I know why we're here and I know what we're doing. I've no doubt. It feels very purpose driven, but also an absolute joy, and as Amber said, I never, I swear to you, not one day do I wake up and think, oh, I've got to go to the shop. It's like, whoa, shop.
I know, we're in on the days when we're not meant to be working. It's hard to resist going, oh, hi, what's new? It's
hard to stay away. It is. It's a joy. And I think the other thing for me, as I said before, that I'm not one of life's risk takers, that free fall when you do finally step off, is not as bad as you think. And actually, it's quite exhilarating in some ways. And I stopped worrying about the future and just enjoy this ride. It's great, and I think if you have, I'm not saying it's not been 100% rosy the whole time, and I think there are quiet days in February when you have 2 customers the whole day. It's raining in Shaftesbury and no one's out, and you have to tell yourself not to say that's it's over, no one will ever shop. It's just a quiet day, and but you learn that, and you learn that tomorrow may be busy, and certainly Saturday will be, and then there's Christmas. And so I think just trusting that the free fall will be okay. That's been a big learning curve for me, but it's quite fun and exhilarating as you go. So
Well, that sounds like a valuable message to anyone who's thinking of doing something similar. Amber, do you have a message that you would say to someone who's thinking of jumping off the cliff and doing something different?
It looks terrifying when you're on the cliff, and when you look back, you wonder what took you so long. It's it really is, and I don't know if we're programmed in that way to think that we shouldn't take a risk. What's the worst that can happen? You know, and once you've kind of faced that, and if you've got the support of your friends or your family or your partner, and you vocalize that, then actually, yeah, what is the worst that can happen? If it all goes belly up and people have bought all the books, we'll go back and do something different. But have
Yeah.
that faith, and it's never as bad as you think.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great place to end things. Thank you both. It's so inspiring and so encouraging, and I'm looking forward to a trip to Dorset. So I can and hopefully lots of people who've been watching will find their way to visit you at the FOLDE. And yeah, and great to see where things go from here.